If you were around in the 60s, Creedence Clearwater Revival likely became your #1 favorite band. Successful with many famous hits, the band's history has always been a magnet that attracts the attention of many fans. However, contrary to what we think, Creedence Clearwater Revival has experienced many tragic stories that no one expected since its early years of operation. If you are interested, please don't miss this video because we will provide you with the band's secret stories over the past 6 decades. First, John Fogerty and Doug Clifford were tragically conscripted into the Army, forever changed by the relentless hand of fate. In the turbulent era of the late 1960s, against the backdrop of the Vietnam War, Creedence Clearwater Revival's iconic anti-war anthem, "Fortunate Son," emerged as a haunting lament of the disenfranchised and dispossessed youth of America. The song is sung from the perspective of a less privileged young man who, unlike those with means and connections, cannot evade the ominous shadow of the U.S. draft. Its lyrics resonate with the harsh realities faced by many young Americans during that time, and it has since become emblematic of that era, to the point of being satirized and parodied. The genesis of this song is deeply intertwined with the personal experiences of the band's songwriter and frontman, John Fogerty, and the group's drummer, Doug Clifford. Before they were the musical legends known as Creedence Clearwater Revival, John and Doug, along with John's brother and guitarist Tom Fogerty and bassist Stu Cook, were part of a high school band named the Blue Velvet. In a twist of fate, John and Doug found themselves living the very circumstances they would later immortalize in "Fortunate Son." As the draft loomed large over their lives, John Fogerty took proactive measures to shape his destiny. He recognized that his draft number was soon approaching, and so he promptly enlisted in the U.S. Army Reserves. In his service, he was assigned the role of a supply clerk, a position that would spare him from being thrust into the throes of combat. While his active duty in the military lasted just 6 months, it was a pivotal period in his life. During his service, Fogerty was stationed at various locations, including Fort Bragg in North Carolina and the Quartermaster School in Fort Lee, Virginia. These experiences gave him a unique insight into the military's inner workings and the broader context of the Vietnam War. As he mingled with fellow soldiers, he couldn't help but notice that the conflict in Vietnam was deeply unpopular, even among those who had taken up arms to serve their country. In an interview with the Military Times, Fogerty shared his perspective on the war, saying, "The war was very unpopular. Even with us in the military, we weren't in love with that war. Nobody really wanted to go fight in a jungle." Fogerty's time in the military proved to be a formative period that would go on to shape his songwriting and influence the direction of Creedence Clearwater Revival. By 1968, as the Vietnam War continued to rage on, John Fogerty's and Doug Clifford's military service had come to an end. It was during this time that they began creating the music that would capture the disillusionment and outrage of their generation. "Fortunate Son" was just one of the many powerful songs they crafted, reflecting the tumultuous times and the perspective of those who had witnessed the war's harsh realities up close. The song went on to become an enduring anthem of protest and a lasting symbol of the era's social and political upheaval. Second, Tom Fogerty's departure casts a somber shadow over Creedence Clearwater Revival. After the pivotal meeting aimed at diffusing the mounting tension within Creedence Clearwater Revival, a dark cloud of tragedy loomed over the band. In January 1971, the first bombshell dropped when Tom Fogerty, one of the band's founding members, announced his departure. This shocking decision signaled the beginning of the end for one of the era's most beloved and successful musical groups. Drummer Doug Clifford, who was Tom's closest ally within the band, revealed in an interview with Uncut the depth of the anger and resentment between the two Fogerty brothers. He described how Tom had endured a great deal of frustration and mistreatment from John. Tom had faced numerous obstacles in his quest for success, and it was evident that John had not been supportive of his siblings' aspirations. The band's dynamics had been strained for a long time, and the friction had taken a heavy toll on their relationship. John Fogerty, offering his perspective to The Guardian, explained that Tom's departure was driven by jealousy. He believed that Tom, as the older brother, couldn't handle the fact that the younger brother possessed more talent and was gaining more recognition. This sibling rivalry had festered within the band, contributing to the mounting internal conflicts. Tom Fogerty attempted to downplay his exit, asserting that it wasn't a premeditated move and there was no ill will between him and his bandmates. He cited his need to explore and develop his own musical talent as the reason for his departure. With Tom's exit, the power dynamic within Creedence Clearwater Revival shifted, giving Doug Clifford and Stu Cook more influence with fewer band members and John gradually loosening his control. The tragic twist in this story was that Tom Fogerty left the band at the very pinnacle of their success. Just before his departure, the Houston Chronicle noted that Creedence Clearwater Revival had been named the world's top vocal group by NME, underscoring the extent of their international acclaim. Remarkably, Tom Fogerty had contributed only one released song during his tenure with the band, Walk on the Water, which emphasized the stark difference in his level of involvement compared to John Fogerty. Third, Creedence Clearwater Revival's relentless triumph amidst turbulent times. Creedence Clearwater Revival, also known as Creedence Clearwater Revival, was a band that rose to fame in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Led by the talented but uncompromising John Fogerty, the band experienced immense success, but also internal strife that ultimately led to their tragic downfall. The band's journey began with the release of their debut album and the success of the single Susie Q. Eager to capitalize on their newfound fame, Creedence Clearwater Revival entered their first Hollywood studio to work on the iconic song, Proud Mary. It was during this recording session that tensions within the band began to surface. The other three members of the group started expressing their desire for more involvement in the songwriting and recording process. John Fogerty, who had been the primary driving force behind the band's music, had been working on their songs largely in solitude. When the issue was brought up during a dinner with the band, Fogerty made it clear that his vision for the band was non-negotiable, fearing that any compromise could hinder their success. Despite being the youngest member of Creedence Clearwater Revival and even the younger brother of his bandmate Tom Fogerty, John was unquestionably in control of the group. Under his strong and unwavering leadership, the band became one of the hottest musical acts in America between 1969 and 1971. They graced the stage at various summer festivals and consistently topped the pop charts. However, beneath their success, there was a simmering tension, primarily stemming from Tom's frustration with his brother's dominance in the band. Tom Fogerty had, on multiple occasions, threatened to leave the band due to his strained relationship with John. This ongoing discord and resentment among the band members began to take its toll. Their 1970 hit song, Have You Ever Seen the Rain, is said to have conveyed the unhappiness and strife the band was experiencing. While the song's lyrics seem to speak of universal themes, they also reflect the internal turmoil that was plaguing Creedence Clearwater Revival at the time. Fourth, the disintegration of Creedence Clearwater Revival after the release of Mardi Gras marked the tragic conclusion of the band's tumultuous journey. However, this wasn't the end of the conflicts involving Creedence Clearwater Revival and their frontman, John Fogerty. In the years following the band's breakup, A bitter and protracted battle over the rights to their music would unfold, leaving a dark shadow over Fogerty's career and his ability to perform the songs that had made him famous. The origins of this conflict could be traced back to the unfavorable deal that John Fogerty had struck with Fantasy Records in the early days of Creedence Clearwater Revival. Under this agreement, Fantasy Records had exclusive publishing rights to Fogerty's music. As time went on, Fogerty began to realize that he was being treated unfairly and was not receiving the compensation he believed he deserved for his creative work. In his own words, "I realized I was being treated very poorly and that I wasn't being paid anywhere near a proper way. In the back of my mind, I wanted to own my songs, my children, you might say." The situation was further exacerbated by the intense animosity between Saul Zaentz, the head of Fantasy Records, and John Fogerty. This animosity had been brewing during the later years of Creedence Clearwater Revival and only intensified after the band's breakup in 1972. While Saul Zaentz allowed the other former band members to exit their contracts, he stubbornly refused to release John Fogerty from his agreement, effectively trapping him in a prolonged and contentious legal battle. Fogerty's deep-rooted aversion to working with Zaentz, coupled with his determination to regain control of his publishing rights, led to his decision to boycott his own classic Creedence Clearwater Revival songs. For decades, he refused to perform these iconic tunes despite their enduring popularity and his personal connection to them. This boycott took a significant toll on Fogerty's career and left a void in his live performances. Fans and fellow musicians alike lamented the absence of these beloved songs in his repertoire. It was a tragic standoff, one that showcased the power of contractual disputes and personal grievances in the music industry. The situation eventually saw a glimmer of resolution when Saul Zaentz sold off his interest in Fantasy Records. With this change in ownership, John Fogerty returned to the label and released the album Revival in 2007. This marked a turning point, and Fogerty gradually became more comfortable with performing his classic Creedence Clearwater Revival songs once again. Fifth, John Fogerty, at long last, succumbs to fate's unyielding grasp. Creedence Clearwater Revival, despite dethroning the Beatles as the highest-selling band in the world by 1969, found themselves on the brink of tragic disintegration. John Fogerty, the band's charismatic frontman, was often described as an autocrat by critics and insiders. Later in life, he openly acknowledged his maniacal control over the group, which contributed to their eventual downfall. As documented in the VH1 documentary Legends, John Fogerty and Creedence Clearwater Revival, the tensions within the band had reached a critical point by 1970. Doug Clifford, one of the band members, recalled, "Things were getting very difficult in the business arena. It was taking a toll on John, it was taking a toll on us because we weren't involved in these meetings, and we weren't getting information back from John." The breaking point came on the eve of recording their 7th album, when the other 3 members of Creedence Clearwater Revival decided to confront John Fogerty. Frustrated by their lack of input and feeling excluded from crucial decisions, they demanded a more substantial say in the band's creative process and direction. The escalating pressure within the band was further compounded by John Fogerty's deteriorating marriage to his wife, Martha Pice. The weight of maintaining their status as a dominant force in the music industry, combined with personal struggles and mounting internal tensions, pushed John to a point where he had to make a difficult decision. In the end, driven by the desire to remain at the pinnacle of the music scene and realizing the necessity for compromise, John Fogerty reluctantly conceded to the demands of his bandmates. This marked a pivotal moment in Creedence Clearwater Revival's history, where John's iron grip on the band began to loosen, albeit at a considerable cost. Tragically, the band's internal turmoil and the toll it took on its members and their relationships would ultimately contribute to the unraveling of one of the most iconic bands of its era. 6. Creedence Clearwater Revival tragically graced the stage at Woodstock. The summer of 1969 marked a significant moment in music history, epitomized by the legendary Woodstock Festival, and Creedence Clearwater Revival was poised to shine as one of its brightest stars. Johnny Mitchell's poetic line, "By the time we got to Woodstock, we were 500,000 strong," captures the essence of the festival, and it seemed to reflect the zenith of Creedence Clearwater Revival's career at that time. The band had just released their third album, Green River, a mere 2 weeks before the Woodstock Festival, and they were riding high on a wave of success. As they prepared to take the stage at Woodstock, Creedence Clearwater Revival stood as arguably the top act in the lineup, holding a unique position of prominence. John Fogerty, the band's frontman and creative force, expressed a profound sense of confidence in their abilities, famously stating, "By the time we got to Woodstock, I felt we were the #1 band. Assuming that the Beatles were God, I thought that we were the next thing under them." It was a time when they believed they were on the verge of reaching the pinnacle of rock and roll. However, what should have been a triumphant performance at Woodstock turned into a profound disappointment for the band. As reported by the Chicago Tribune, technical difficulties and weather-related delays led to Creedence Clearwater Revival's set being pushed past midnight on Sunday, August 17. As they took the stage in front of the massive Woodstock crowd, John Fogerty noticed that many of the concert-goers were fatigued and had been through the rigors of the festival, describing them as all intertwined and asleep, covered with mud. This was a far cry from the electrifying atmosphere that they had anticipated. In retrospect, Fogerty attributed part of their lackluster performance to the Grateful Dead's extended set that preceded theirs. In an interview with the LA Times, he voiced his frustration, stating, "At Woodstock, they were just a bunch of drugged-out hippies." It's worth noting that the Grateful Dead set had its own challenges, as Live for Live music reports their equipment had been damaged by the rain, and they were only able to play 5 songs during their hour-and-a-half set 7th, John Fogerty's legal battles with Saul Zaentz, a tragic tale of litigation and conflict. The animosity between John Fogerty and Saul Zaentz, the head of Fantasy Records, went beyond the typical conflicts in the music industry and played out tragically over several decades. Zaentz, leveraging the money he made and royalties he received from Creedence Clearwater Revival, transitioned into a successful career as a film producer. He earned 3 Academy Awards for his work on renowned films such as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Amadeus, and The English Patient, solidifying his reputation in the film industry, according to The Hollywood Reporter. The feud between John Fogerty and Saul Zaentz took a particularly bitter turn with the release of Fogerty's 1985 album, Centerfield. 2 songs from the album stood out, and they intensified the legal and personal battles between the artist and the label head. The first of these songs, The Old Man Down the Road, resulted in a lawsuit by Zaentz and Fantasy Records. They alleged that the song sounded strikingly similar to Creedence Clearwater Revival's Run Through the Jungle, which, ironically, was also penned by John Fogerty. In a dramatic court showdown, Fogerty defended himself by playing both songs live for the judge, demonstrating the distinct differences between them. Ultimately, the judge ruled in favor of the artist, as reported by Ultimate Classic Rock. However, the more contentious and vindictive of the 2 songs was originally titled Zans Kant Dans. In this song, Fogerty openly lambasted Saul Zaentz as a talentless thief, personifying him as the eponymous character Zans, who was portrayed as a thieving pig. The scathing chorus included the lines, "Zans can't dance, but he'll steal your money. Watch him, or he'll rob you blind." Predictably, Zaentz threatened legal action over this highly critical song. In response to the threat, John Fogerty reluctantly changed the title to Vans Kant Dans, according to Songfacts. This song exemplified the deep-seated enmity between the artist and his former label head, with Fogerty using his music as a platform to vent his grievances and frustrations. The legal battles and personal animosity between John Fogerty and Saul Zaentz persisted for years, casting a pall over Fogerty's career and the legacy of Creedence Clearwater Revival. This ongoing feud remained a tragic testament to the bitter conflicts that can arise between artists and their record labels, serving as a reminder of the complex dynamics and struggles that exist within the music industry. The chapter of this story finally reached its conclusion with Saul Zaentz's death in 2014. At that point, John Fogerty's response was a poignant and symbolic one. He simply posted the video for Vans Kant Dance on his social media, marking the end of a decades-long and deeply troubled relationship, as reported by NPR. Eighth, with Tom Fogerty's departure and Creedence Clearwater Revival, now reduced to a power trio, the band faced a pivotal moment in their career, and the tragic decline of their once mighty presence was becoming increasingly evident. Their plan was to return to the studio and create another classic album, which ultimately became 1972's Mardi Gras. However, the ambitious vision for this album was marred by the deep-seated tension and anger that had long plagued the band's relationship with their leader, John Fogerty. In a desperate attempt to salvage their collaboration, the three remaining members of Creedence Clearwater Revival decided to divide songwriting and singing responsibilities among themselves for Mardi Gras. This marked a stark departure from the past, as John Fogerty had been the primary creative force behind the band's music. The result was an album that would not only be their final effort, but also their most disappointing. Mardi Gras would prove to be a monumental disappointment and a far cry from their previous successes. The critical reception of Mardi Gras was scathing, with Rolling Stone's John Landau famously referring to it as Fogerty's Revenge. In his harsh critique, he labeled it as the worst album ever released by a major rock group. The album did manage to achieve a modest chart position, reaching number 12 on the Billboard album chart, primarily thanks to the Fogerty-penned tune Sweet Hitchhiker. However, this success couldn't mask the glaring shortcomings of the album. John Fogerty's creative involvement in Mardi Gras was notably diminished, as he contributed only 3 songs and sang a cover of Ricky Nelson's Hello, Mary Lou. Stu Cook and Doug Clifford, emboldened by the newfound creative freedom granted by Fogerty, penned and sang their own songs. While this shift was meant to foster a more collaborative atmosphere, it ultimately revealed the band's internal divisions. The album's shortcomings were exacerbated by the fact that it failed to generate the same critical and commercial success as Creedence Clearwater Revival's previous efforts. Strikingly, the songs written by both Stu Cook and John Fogerty seemed to serve as a poignant reflection of their strained relationship and the inevitable disintegration of the band. Cook's Take It Like a Friend and Fogerty's Lookin' for a Reason appeared to express the profound challenges that the band was facing. Adding a tragic and bitter twist to the tale, John Fogerty reportedly allowed the other members to sing their songs as a way of illustrating his superiority as a songwriter and performer. Ninth, the hope for a true Creedence Clearwater Revival reunion without the late Tom Fogerty has remained an unattainable dream due to the deep-seated animosities and irreparable differences among the surviving members. The band's legacy has been marred by unresolved conflicts and tragic divisions that have persisted over the years. Despite the enduring desire among fans for the surviving members to set aside their grievances and perform together under the Creedence Clearwater Revival name, such hopes have largely remained wishful thinking. The bitter emotions between the band members have proven to be insurmountable, making a true reunion an impossibility. The tensions within the band became particularly evident following the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, where John Fogerty's refusal to share the stage with Stu Cook and Doug Clifford highlighted the deep-seated animosity. In response to this, as reported by Ultimate Classic Rock, Doug Clifford and Stu Cook formed their own band, Creedence Clearwater Revisited, in 1995. This move was seen by many as a missed opportunity for reconciliation and collaboration, as the surviving members continued to go their separate ways. Creedence Clearwater Revisited embarked on tours over the years, culminating in their announcement of retirement following their 2019 tour. This decision did not sit well with John Fogerty, who viewed it as a deliberate attempt to overshadow his career. Fogerty expressed his frustration to Rolling Stone, stating, "They could have said it 2 weeks ago or the day after next week, but it's them dogging my career, so it's not unusual." The legal battles and disputes involving the use of the Creedence Clearwater Revival name have further underscored the enduring rift within the band. Fogerty had previously sued Doug Clifford and Stu Cook over their use of a similar name to the original band, which resulted in them having to change it until an appellate court ruled in their favor. In another legal wrangle, as reported in 2014, Doug Clifford and Stu Cook, along with the estate of Tom Fogerty, sued John Fogerty for trademark infringement related to a series of album-length performance concerts. Fogerty countered with his own lawsuit. These legal battles only served to deepen the divisions and bitterness among the surviving members. 10th, the story of Tom and John Fogerty is a tragic tale of a family torn apart by a combination of professional and personal conflicts, one of which would ultimately have devastating consequences. Their story, unfortunately, does not have a happy ending, and the wounds inflicted during their tumultuous relationship remain unhealed. The rift between the two brothers began when Tom Fogerty decided to leave Creedence Clearwater Revival. Tom firmly aligned himself with Saul Zaentz and Fantasy Records in John's protracted legal battles against the label and its head. Their bond as siblings was shattered by the weight of these disagreements, and despite the blood ties that bound them, their relationship became irreparably damaged. Tragically, Tom's demise was further compounded by a terrible twist of fate. During the 1980s, he found himself in need of a blood transfusion. This seemingly routine medical procedure took a catastrophic turn when Tom became infected with the HIV virus from tainted blood, as reported by Rock and Roll Garage. This unfortunate turn of events added a layer of tragedy to the already strained relationship between the two brothers. Despite their deep-seated differences, John Fogerty made attempts to mend fences with his brother, spurred on by the desire to reconcile for the sake of their mother. The two brothers engaged in conversations and even agreed to write down their grievances in an effort to work through their long-standing conflicts. However, these efforts at reconciliation faltered when John accused his brother of suing him, and Tom vehemently denied any involvement in such legal action. While Tom had indeed filed a lawsuit against John in 1978, he dropped the suit 5 years later. I Love Classic Rock reports that, regrettably, the two brothers never managed to reconcile before Tom's untimely death. This left John to carry the burden of unresolved issues and unhealed wounds, forever haunted by the estrangement from his brother. John Fogerty's reflections on the situation revealed a sense of regret and a desire for forgiveness. He shared his feelings about forgiving his brother, recognizing the need to move forward despite the painful circumstances. At some point, I made a point to myself of forgiving my brother. I just felt like I had to do that because he wasn't around for me to get to work it out with him. What do you think about the tragedies that happened to the band Creedence Clearwater Revival? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.